As the campaigning season of 73 BC came to a close, a victorious army of escaped slaves made its way out of Campania. Well armed, disciplined, provisioned, motivated, and well led, this army found itself master of the local terrain, having somehow defeated two large ad hoc Roman forces, both led by praetors and one even bearing the imperial fasces of Rome. Under the leadership of former Thracian and Gallic gladiators, this band had escaped the gladiatorial school of Lentulus Batiates with 78 men. On their way out of Campania, however, over 2,000 experienced warriors marched south as top dogs in the region. The arrival of winter meant the usual Roman pausing of operations and transitioning to winter quarters. However, as the rebels were now in the warmer climate of southern Italy, they had access to traversable and accessible coastal routes, allowing them to continue moving and resupplying with raids and foraging for most of the winter late 73 and early 72 BC. Florus tells us during their exit, they particularly devastated the Campanian towns of Nola and Nuceria. It's at this point that the rebels and their movement reached critical mass, growing rapidly and passing into the tens of thousands. Not only were the infantry well armed, but they fought in combination with capable light infantry and now cavalry, as in the rugged plains of Campania and northern Apulia, gangs of wild horses still roamed undisturbed due to the lack of humans and prevalence of disease. At least the initial core of frontline infantry came from the freed Celtic, Thracian, and Germanic slaves and gladiators, while the local Italian shepherds and freemen were specifically mentioned as providing scouts and light infantry, in addition to regular infantry. While proper Romans joined Spartacus, since much of the recruitment happened in the rugged outskirts of southern Italy, the local Oscan-speaking Samnites, Lucanians, and Bruttians also joined the rebellion in large contingents, once more taking up arms against Rome, just like they had during the invasion of Pyrrhus, Hannibal, and the Social War. Spartacus, despite his growing power, still remained egalitarian and fair, thus earning the loyalty and love of his men, any new recruits, and all of the ancient scribes. In addition, his sub-commanders excelled in their duty, as they were not only capable of spreading all of their gladiatorial knowledge, but also capable of leadership by themselves. Not only did their general fight in the front line, but so did all of the other captains, creating a leadership that operated like the Homeric heroes of the Iliad. On the growing list of Spartacus' virtues, we can add foresight. From Plutarch, he began to be great and terrible, but wisely considering that he was not to expect to match the force of empire, he marched his army towards the Alps, intending, when he had passed them, that every man should go to his home, some to Thrace, some to Gaul. The Thracian general uniquely recognized that despite scoring multiple victories against Rome and now in possession of a proper army, the Romans employed hundreds of thousands of soldiers throughout the empire, on top of having the ability to simply recruit new legions en masse from its walled cities. As for the rebels, they had no access to siege equipment, making storming any walled settlement impossible. Also, since they received no resupply or reinforcements, extended sieges were off the table as well. Not to mention that their overall numbers were simply too small to wage a full-scale war with Rome, probably peaking at around 50,000 during this stage. More realistically, since this was an army with no nation in the middle of an entirely hostile empire, even one defeat in battle was likely to destroy the whole army, as there would be nowhere to retreat and regroup. All of that is to say, there were no realistic paths to outright military victory, There was, however, a realistic path to a survival and freedom if the rebels made their way north and crossed the Alps, as was the vision of Spartacus. As they ascended the Italian peninsula, however, some of the rebel warriors found themselves unwilling to give up the power gained by following Spartacus and preferred to stay in Italy, ravaging the country and the locals. This group, described as Germanic by Plutarch, was led by Crixus and strayed from the main host of Spartacus. Appian gives their numbers at 30,000, although it's unlikely to have crossed 20,000 in reality. This caused great alarm throughout the Roman Senate, which up until now felt great embarrassment at the ongoing situation, but did not feel truly threatened by the insurgents. Hearing now about the large size and destruction of the insurgency, the Senate finally dispatched 2 consuls, the highest officials of Rome, each leading 2 legions and marching under a golden eagle standard, and supported by an equal amount of allied troops. In early 72 BC, as winter gave way to spring and the campaigning season resumed, approximately 40,000 heavy legionaries and their allies descended the Roman pathways of southern Italy, blades thirsting for blood and centurions barking of war.